All righty. Thank you. This is Walisha Wilson, and this interview is with Dr. Tyree A. Anderson, Tyree. A is the middle initial, Anderson, Anderson. He's a pastor and public intellectual over in what part of Alabama are you in?
I'm right now in Inslee, Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay. And we wanted to have you on specifically, even though you're not in Georgia, you bring a very unique perspective to the campaign that we're doing here, that all of us are non-chapters doing, as well as what I'm doing with this project will represent justice to end slavery in Georgia, because you yourself have work around the 13th Amendment, as well as uh, so tell us about the work that you've done around 13th Amendment, as well as some history about Alabama and it being on their ballot.
Okay. One, I want to thank you so very much for the opportunity to be with you and to support this project. I think it's absolutely critical for us to understand that slavery is still in existence in the United States, and it is endorsed from the federal level all the way down to the state level. When trying to see about how far back I actually go in doing this type of work, I probably go all the way back to 2001 when I was serving as the team lead for an AmeriCorps Vista program known as the Extended Angel Tree Program. The whole purpose of the program was to actually work with children whose parents were, at that time, the word used is incarcerated. I want to kind of make a flip on that now, because there's a difference between being in prison and being incarcerated and being a returning citizen. Each one of them mean something totally different. The people that we are focused on now, trying to get their voting rights back and everything else, these are returning citizens. Those who have gone to prison, they were in prison. But then you got this other piece, which is incarcerated. These are the individuals who were incarcerated in their mental capacity and in their social standing and in their social status before they went to prison. Prison becomes the next, unfortunately, the next natural stage of a person's incarceration. So a person could be incarcerated before they go to prison because intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, financially, and culturally, they were already incarcerated based on where they were born, where they grew up, what kind of social status they had in the community, what type of resources were there, whether things were already stemmed against them before they were born. And many people are born into an incarcerated situation that is eventually played out when they go to prison. And then when they get out, they become returning citizens. So I want to kind of adjust some of the language, because I know that that's kind of what we've been doing, is using incarceration for this broad scope. But I want to try and break it down. So I was working with children, creating a national program for children whose parents were in prison. These children were growing up in an incarcerated condition, because the way that the statistics argue was that if they had a parent in prison, there was about a 65% chance that they were going to wind up in prison as well. Then their children, there's a 33% chance that the grandchildren will go to prison. So it becomes a generational reality of people going to prison that get caught up in this incarceration system. So working with these children, working with these parents, working with many single mothers who boyfriends or husbands were in prison, to get them financially educated, to get them qualified to buy a house, to get them out of certain conditions. I began to work with this particular population as a AmeriCorps Vista team lead back in 2003. It was in 2003. Once I completed my master's work and it's crazy because this is how it all kind of ties together. Once I finished my master's work at George Mason University, with a master's degree in American history with a concentration in the era of Reconstruction, the same time period that the 13th Amendment would be formulated and put together. So I became familiar with the 13th Amendment and its intricacies while I was in grad school. Didn't think too much about it until I started working with this population. And from there, working with my father in the ministry, who is now gone, Dr. Lee Arthur Earl, who in his doctoral work at the Ashland Theological Seminary in Ashland, Ohio, with a concentration, his concentration was in Black church studies. Him being a former member of the board of directors for Prison Fellowship, being involved in this entire work, pretty much his entire life, we began to work on his doctoral work. And the key piece of this was the 13th Amendment. And it was something that I brought to his attention about that exception clause that's written in it, that slavery is abolished, except if you've been found guilty of committing a crime. So if you've been found guilty of committing a felony, you no longer are an American citizen. You are now a slave, or you a ward of the state, or you a ward of the feds, and you never get out from under that, because once you become a ward or of the state or the feds, there's no way for you to get reintroduced into society as a regular American citizen. And so that work began to formulate. I began to work more with people that were coming out of prison, these returning citizens, trying to get them jobs, running into all kinds of problems with them getting jobs and keeping jobs because of the stigma attached to individuals who go to prison. And as I used to always say, because I was supervisory chaplain with the Federal Bureau of Prisons at FCI, FDC Tallahassee, I used to always tell them that the difference between me and you is you got caught. And they'll start laughing. I'm like, no, for real.
That's the truth.
Me and you is that you got caught, I didn't. I'm not gonna tell you what I did, but you got caught, I didn't. And that became something that they began to understand, that even the people working there could have easily ended up as an inmate or as a resident of the institution, especially if you were born Black in America and grew up in certain environments and certain conditions. And so I began to work with different organizations in Virginia to try to get voting rights for people that were getting out of prison, and, you know, trying to make sure that they were able to vote, because one of the main things about citizenship is that you are a citizen if you can vote. Because if you can't vote, you can't sit on the jury, and it literally restricts your entire movement in society. So when people get out of prison, they need to be able, so working with different organizations in the Commonwealth of Virginia, trying to ensure that people who got out of prison could actually get the right to vote. I was called down to Florida by my pastor, Dr. R.B. Holmes, as they worked on the restoring the right to vote for people getting out of prison, that Ron DeSantis has found all kinds of loopholes to tie everybody up that could vote, because the people voted that we want them to be able to vote. And then he gets in there and overturns everything, acting as if he's an autocratic dictator. And so all this takes place, but I've been involved in this stuff since 2000, really since 2003. So next year, it'll be a total of 20 years. I've been on the ground grinding, trying to get this exception clause addressed, bringing attention to it, and really trying to bring attention to it before there was a Netflix documentary. So before everybody else became aware of it, some of us were already working in the trenches, trying to make sure that we get this exception clause addressed. And so I am so happy that it's not just on the ballot in the state of Alabama, but there are 4 other states as well that's working on this to get this thing addressed. Because if you're going to end slavery, my God, end it. Don't find loopholes to bring it back, so that way people can get rich off of somebody else's misery.
I love that. Don't say that again. If you're gonna end slavery, do what?
End it. I mean, put it into it. There are too many people who have become filthy rich on somebody else's misery. They are buying their yachts, they're buying their vacation homes, they're going all over the world, getting paid off of stock that come from the Geo Group and from some of these other organizations that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange, getting filthy rich off of somebody else's misery. And instead of recognizing people who have gone to prison as individuals and as human beings, treating them like animals. I mean, if you're going to end it, end it. Don't pretend like you're going to end it and then bring it back in another form.
Exactly. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you on this call. And I figure it was just divine intervention that we had a mutual associate that was like, hey, this is what I need to get, you need to speak with him. So I'm just so grateful that I was able to be connected with you and to be able to hear your passion and your commitment to this for 20 years, to be on the ground, boots on the ground, doing this work before some folks even thought about it. And so I just want to just thank you for the work that you've been doing. And I know Colorado is one of the states that have already passed it.
Right.
And I can't remember it's another state that has done it as well, but I'm hearing that there are other states who are also saying this makes sense.
If I remember right, there are 3 states. One of them was Colorado. That was the first one, because
yes,
that becomes the blueprint. But I think that there are 2 other states. I think Vermont was one. I think Vermont was one. But there's a 3rd state. But on this year's election for this midterm, there are 5 states. And I was kind of shocked and surprised which states, because these are
what states are they? Because I was shocked that Alabama's
one, Tennessee one, and Louisiana. And I just want to name those 3 because these 3 are steeped in racism and white supremacy and became extremely rich and wealthy based on slavery. And so I thought it was very unique and odd that these particular 3 states, there are 2 more I can't remember off the top of my head, but these are the 3 that stood out. They're Louisiana, Tennessee, and Alabama.
Well, that is good. I'm wishing y'all all the best of luck, and I'm watching because I'm hoping Georgia is going to be in that run. And at some point, Georgia needs to just get with the program and start prioritizing people over profits.
Exactly.
And so we trying to follow suit. We trying to follow suit. I wanted to ask you about what would you say to folks who and I know this wasn't the initial question I was going to ask, but what do you say to people when they say prison slave labor is a benefit to the community? It teaches them training skills, it gives them something to do. They really want to get out anyway to do that stuff. They'd be glad to get out and pick up trash and stuff.
It doesn't. It allows them to get out, but it also reminds them that they are not free. It is anyone who says that it builds character, let them change the place with these individuals and let's see if it builds their character. It doesn't build character. If anything, it actually creates more of a depressed state, because they know that when that day is over, they have to go back to count. They got to go stand up and be counted. They have to go back and sleep in that particular bed that has been probably slept on by numerous amounts of people. They got to go back to the same laundry. They got to go back to mainline. They got to. So no, it doesn't build character. And anyone who says that it's a benefit to the community need to redefine what community means. Because that's not community. That is free slave labor. I mean, I used to see it inside of the institution all the time. Anytime individual will receive a phone call about we would like to know if you would like to reestablish your subscription to said magazine, you was talking to somebody who was in prison. And they're getting paid 20 cents an hour. 20 cents. 15 cents an hour. Depending on what their job is, they may be getting paid 5 cents an hour. And then they have to go back in and renegotiate with other individuals in order to try and find ways to get ramen noodles or try and buy some snack cakes or do, I mean, it becomes another hustle. And so it is not beneficial to the community. It is not beneficial to the resident, because I don't like the word inmate. I think that that is absolutely deplorable, and it does not lead to reentry. If anything, it leads to individuals going back into the prison, because when they finally get out, they can't see themselves as anything but an inmate. So
Yes,
they're
and
not
that's why we're really stressing about using humanizing language. We don't use
yeah,
words
yeah,
like ex-con and convict, prisoner,
yeah,
inmate,
yeah,
offender,
yeah.
things
I mean,
like that. So I appreciate you for acknowledging that.
I had a long dragged out argument with some of the staff at FCI Tallahassee, because I was teaching these women and these men, when you walk past and they say, "Hey, inmate, keep walking." It was like, why would I do that? I'm gonna get in trouble. So now keep walking. Your name is not inmate. You have a name. And in there, you were taught that they ought to call you Miss So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so. So if you answer the inmate, then now it changes the whole power dynamic. Keep walking. And so I told them that, that's how you handle it. So the staff one day called one of the young ladies, and she kept walking. They said, "You heard me." And then the staff called him by the name, and they turned around. He said, "You heard me calling." He said, "Well, I didn't hear that. I just heard you call inmate. And there's a whole bunch of us around, so I didn't know who you was talking to." "Where you get this from?" "Oh, I got it from Chaplain Amson." So then I get asked, "Why are you teaching them that?" I said, "When you leave here, do people call you CO?" They said, "No, they call me by my name." I said, "There you go. When they leave
Exactly.
here, they don't need to have the name inmate. They are already going to be reminded of the time that they've done, without you infesting their mind with this idea that they are an inmate. They are a person made in the image of God, and they need to understand that just because they made a mistake doesn't mean that they need to be punished for the rest of their lives by being identified as something else."
Exactly. And that sounds like when people say, "Why are you teaching them that?" How they used to say it when about why they want Black folks to learn how to read.
Right.
Because when people have knowledge, that's power. When you
Exactly.
have knowledge of knowing that you're not an inmate, you're not a convict, you're not relegated to your crime. Part of
That's
the
it.
problem, people don't even realize that there are folks in prison who are still innocent. There are
Exactly.
folks who are in there who, and I read countless of stories of how somebody went to prison for some false rape or whatever, served 30 or 40 years, have
Yep.
gotten out and come to find out it was not even their semen or whatever. These folks done got out, you ain't gave them folks no money, their mama done
Yep.
died, their daddy done died, their children done
Yep.
died, and you haven't given these folks anything to say, you ain't even told them a sorry.
Exactly.
But now this is all they've heard. So this is why we have to be very careful with words, because words are extremely powerful. And the words that we use and the actions that we use. So when you're telling people, you're calling them convict, inmate, and now you got them out there working 8, 10, 12 hours, making your license plates, making your bed that you're sleeping on, making the mattresses you sleep on,
Yep.
making your army uniforms, making your forklifts,
Yep.
everything that you use, $11 billion worth of services each year made by incarcerated people. Now you might as well add slave to the list.
Yep.
How in your right mind can get out here and really expect folks to do what they need to do to be in the community? Because they
Exactly.
don't expect that, because it's a business model. That would be too much like right.
Exactly. And I mean, that's one of the problems that we're running into here in Alabama, when you have a governor who has made up in her mind that she was going to take COVID relief money to build some prisons.
That should have been for the Alabama residents. Alabama residents ought to be mad.
But the thing about it, most of them ain't even processing, because that's not something that's on their radar, because they're striving day by day, just trying to put food on the table. So all these other issues just don't seem to matter. And so, the overcrowding. I mean, we just finished having a major strike, a major work stoppage at one of the prisons.
That has the strike officially ended?
To my knowledge, it has. When I was just getting back from Africa, I was told that it had officially ended. But the amount of strain and stress that goes on, the lack of proper health care. I mean, long before you even get into prison, they're already designing and preparing your body to not be able to get the kind of health care you need. So when you go to prison, it's just normal. You just learn how to survive. Then when you come out, you still can't get health care. You still can't be taken care of. Why? Because we don't take care of slaves. We take care of American citizens. And if you are,
Oh, that's a good way to say
you're
that.
not, right. If you're a slave, you're not an American citizen. So we don't owe you anything. You shouldn't have done what you
That's
did.
a valid point because back in the day, they didn't give slaves insurance,
Exactly.
make sure they wasn't taken care of. So that is a good correlation for the
Exactly.
folks who feel that it's not slavery. Stop calling it slavery. And it's weird because I hear a lot of black folks saying, stop calling it slavery. It ain't slavery. No, you might not be being whipped by chains on your back. You might not be being hung from a tree because you ain't picking cotton. But when you have, and right now in Mississippi, Texas, and Louisiana, there are still cotton fields where
Exactly.
incarcerated people are working and picking cotton.
Exactly.
And most of them, if not 98% of them, are black men. And you have a white man on a horse with a gun. I don't care what nobody say. They might be wearing black and white stripes or they might be wearing orange, but that's still the same picture of what they did 200, 300, 400 years ago. And so I don't
Exactly.
understand. You don't have to, just like shackles, we don't have to be physically in shackles to be in our mind in shackles and chains, like you said. So I'm not
Exactly.
understanding what is so difficult with people, not seeing that. Maybe because they think it's something voluntary. They don't mind getting out doing it. And they don't realize that some people are actually beat up for refusing to go to work. Some people are placed in solitary confinement. Some people are denied meals, phone calls, and visitations when they refuse to go out and work on those details. So
Exactly.
I'm not really understanding. What do you say to folks who refuse to see that prison slave labor and mass incarceration today is still rooted in racism and slavery from the old pictures? What do you say to that? How do you clear that up for them?
You just got to show them the evidence. I mean, that's the thing about it. We can talk about it, but if we get a chance to show them that this is what it looks like, because a lot of people don't know anything about Angola. If they actually knew about the prison in Louisiana, in Angola, Louisiana, they would have a different outlook. They would have listened to hip hop artists like Boosie, listen to somebody like BG. Listen to some of these hip hop artists that's in prison, and they will tell you this is what it is. It is a form of slavery. And just because you don't see people walking around with chains on, you don't see individuals walking around with as you said, being whipped and so on and so forth, what you find that they still have that same mentality. It is that same mentality, and it is all rooted first in the 13th Amendment. And then it is allowed to be rewritten at the state level so that the state can endorse it and enforce it as well. And the major workforce, and this is what, I've been trying to explain this to you for years to people. Many of these towns, these townships, these little small Hickville locations would not have booming economies if Black bodies were not taken from the inner city and the bond money being moved from the inner city to these little small hick towns and building the prison and building a new high school and building a new housing and building the shopping plaza and building the economy. The money that should be going, say, the money that should be coming, say, to College Park. Say the money should be going to College Park. But instead of the money going to College Park, because 35% of the residents in College Park have been shipped to a particular prison, 35% of that bond money that should have been going to College Park is now going to Hickville, and Hickville has become the booming economy, and people are not going to the factories because they got a new factory called a prison. And the prison is a factory because it is producing more people to go to prison, and the pipeline is from College Park to Hickville. Or where a friend of mine pastors, I got a friend who's in Milwaukee. The most incarcerated zip code in the nation is where his church is located. The majority of the people that are in prison in Wisconsin come out of that Milwaukee zip code. And it's a pipeline from there to the prison. And the money that should have been going to Milwaukee has gone to that prison. It's the same thing in New York, where the prison industrial complex was first established. First establishment was in New York, and they took the money from the inner city and put it out in Hickville and built up Hickville, where now you have multi-million-dollar homes, multi-shopping plazas, all of that based on prison and prison labor and being able to hire people to watch these other people. People are retiring, people have vacation homes, people are traveling all over the world because of the factory, and prisons are factories. As much as people might want to disagree with it, if you go to a prison, you have just entered the factory, and the purpose of the factory is to produce items that can keep the factory going. And the factory, like in the state of Alabama, Kay Ivey, the governor, doesn't want state prisons, she's want for-profit prisons. And the only way for you to build for-profit prisons is that you've got to agree that you're going to be housed at a certain percentage in order for that prison to say, yeah, we're going to come and you can build it and use our name.
Meaning, if we build it, you got to fill it. So if you can guarantee to get people in here,
exactly.
People don't understand that. We need more prisons. We need more prisons. No, because if you build it, you got to fill it. And when you
means that there's more, and that's more slave labor. That's more slave labor, because now you don't fall under the watchful eye of the feds, and you don't fall under the watchful eye of the state. You got your own governance board, and your own governance board will tell you. And everybody who knows anything about for-profit prisons, they are the most dangerous institutions that you can ever have, because they don't have the proper checks and balances in place. It's just about having a bed and a body for as long as you can get them in there. And the moment people begin to turn their lives around, you got to find a way to get them into the hole or put them into the shoe. And then you give them more time, because you got to keep that population filled inside, which means you got to keep the slaveocracy and the slave system continue going.
Ooh, that just give me chills. It just, I'm glad, because I think people need to hear this. They need to hear it, because maybe they're watching too many TV shows where it's for one, glamorizes it, but folks need to hear this is what it is. Prison is a business. And to know that folks are trying to find ways to get around ways of oversight by getting these for-profit prisons lets you know that they don't prioritize you, your family, or your community. Because you're not even a number to them. You just dollar signs to them.
That's right.
So I wanted to ask you, what can Georgians learn from the work that you've done and advocate for the end of slavery in Alabama? And what words of action can you give those watching who think that prison slave labor is a good thing?
Open your mouth. See, it doesn't bother you until it impacts you. You don't see it until it becomes personal. The moment your son or your grandson or your granddaughter or your husband or your wife wind up going to prison, you don't see it. So you think that it don't impact you. It absolutely does impact you. It literally impacts not just your future, but the future of those that are in your family. And so what can you learn? Open your mouth, because it might not happen to your, you may think it only is going to happen to your neighbor. Well, guess what? You could get caught up in a conspiracy charge. See, a lot of people don't seem to understand how that conspiracy thing works. I can give my neighbor a ride to the bank. The feds can be watching my neighbor, and I wind up giving my neighbor a ride to the bank. And once I give my neighbor a ride to the bank, guess who's on the feds' radar now? Now I'm on it. And what happens is, when they finally begin to bring folk in, they got an image of me taking them to the bank, and he's making these deposits, and they think that I'm getting the kickback. They think I'm getting paid. So what happens is either I turn state's evidence or I go to prison. If I don't turn state's evidence, the average time that you will get on a conspiracy charge is 9 years. You could have taken them to the grocery store. But either way it go, you don't think it impacts you. No, it does. You've got to get to the place where you begin to realize that you are your brother's keeper. It's what you are. You are your brother's keeper. You are your sister's keeper. You got to see that it impacts you. It impacts your community. I got so many friends that have gone to prison that I grew up with. They are out now, but they are having the hardest time trying to get a job, trying to get housing, trying to get state ID. I mean, when you start just looking at the basics of this, you've got to say something. And for people who think that it's good, I'm a pastor, so I won't cuss the way I want to cuss right now. You must be out of your mind, because that means that you see yourself as being somebody that will also benefit from it. You won't benefit, because if you get stopped on the dark road by a cop and they plant something in your car and you ain't do anything, as those black folks down in Dothan, Alabama, where the police officers were planting drugs in folks' car. Go down there and ask them. Outstanding citizens wind up needing to go to court and actually prove that they were not drug dealers. And eventually investigation took place and found out that the entire Dothan Police Department was dirty. You don't think it impacts you? It impacts you. It impacts me, and I'm a pastor. When people stop, if a cop stop me, they don't see a pastor, they see a black man. They don't know what I do. They don't know my background. They don't know anything about me. So what do I got to do? I got to fight. I got children. I got to fight for my children. My son is cute, but what happens when my son gets a little older and he now stands 6'4"? He now becomes a threat. My daughter. And so I got to begin to process this stuff and say, man, how can I make sure that I'm doing the work necessary to get this thing overturned? My ancestors, I just came back from Ghana. I just came back from standing in slave castles. I just came back from standing at the slave river and putting my feet in the waters where our ancestors put their feet, and they bathed in that water before they went on down to the slave castles and stayed in those slave castles for 30 and 60 days before they went and got on the ship and came over here. I have to fight for my ancestors. I have to fight for those who were taken forcibly from Africa and taken all around the world. I got to fight for those whose families were torn apart. This isn't the first time that they have done this, and it's not going to be the last. But it's also not my first time fighting, and it's not going to be my last. So I would advise those who are in Georgia, let it be known. Write your senators, write your congressmen. Oh, and by the way, y'all got a major election coming. Y'all better vote and put somebody in there that got some sense instead of somebody putting up a fake police badge, acting like he's actually law enforcement. You better get somebody in there that can actually get some work done instead of somebody that's going to put us back 300, 400, 500 years as the people. I ain't telling you who to vote for. I'm just saying that if you don't vote for the right person, you're going to get yourself in a world of trouble. And this will never get on the ballot. Get this on the ballot. Get out there. Because as long as you got a criminal in chief that stole the last governor election, what you think gonna happen? You got to get the right people in place that can actually bring justice. If you don't vote and get the right people in office, then you are not going to be able to change the narrative and change the scope of everything that's going on. So that is my advice. Get out there, beat them streets, let these people know that you want to get this on the ballot, and do not quit until it gets on the ballot. And once it's on the ballot, now you got to go to the next level and get people to go and vote to overturn this Jim Crow post-colonial law that still destroying the lives of individuals in Georgia. That's what I would do.
Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna have to leave the room. I don't know what's going on. My screen is black on my end. And I know you probably can still see me because the last person I interviewed. So I had to get on my phone. But I really appreciate you have given us some dynamic information. I appreciate it. I wanted to ask you one last thing. What do you think would be the benefits to the community if when Alabama, Georgia, and all those other states, what is the benefit to the community of ending the law and making slavery truly illegal?
It'll change policing. It'll change policing. It'll change sentencing. It'll change what the prison system looks like. It'll change the whole scope of what the infernal slavery system looks like. I believe, because now you can't arrest people knowing that you're going to get paid by their bodies for the next 15 to 20 years.
That's exactly what the last person I interviewed said, that by passing this law and getting this passed, they would no longer be able to force people to work, and it would no longer incentivize putting people in prison, and it would probably more likely reduce the prison mass incarceration trend. So I definitely agree with that.
And they'll be paying out so much money from lawsuits that'll come for these individuals violating the law. They'll have to rethink the entire system.
All right, I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. I appreciate it. And if when this recording, I'll actually send you a link to it, but we will, I'll also let you know when the final product comes out, so you'll actually be able to see it all. But we would love to be able to, with your permission, be able to share this on our YouTube page.
Oh, absolutely.
I think this is some information that folks need to hear. I really wish I had been streaming it live on Facebook, because I tell you, I get, it just get chills when I get to hear some of this stuff. And I think a lot of people's minds just need to be open, and we need more folks to be able to, who are knowledgeable, to open those minds. So I appreciate you, and thank you for giving me 45 minutes of your time. I know you're extremely busy, a lot of great work to do, and we would definitely keep in touch, and I appreciate you being here.
Sounds great. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
Keep me abreast of what's going on and how I can help from over here. I mean, we next door neighbors. I mean, so,
Exactly.
It's only a few hour drive. So, you just let me know if I got to get over there to help you do something. Let me know, and I'll see what I can do, and pull together a team to come on over and do some agitating. Ain't nothing like agitation.
That's right. And that's what I got in my thing. I'm an agitator. And before we go, I can't go without letting everybody know you are a brother of Phi Beta Sigma. So we want to make sure that we get them on the ground too. We know the Sigmas love to do some community work and some advocacy work. And so I'm close to a lot of Sigmas when I was in college, and several of them here now. And so I'm just excited about meeting you, connecting with you in future services and circles and stuff, and getting this work done. And I appreciate you.
I thank
you so much.
All right.
You have a great one.
Same to you. Bye.